Okay.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for being here this afternoon. And hello to all of you who are watching online. I'm Natalie Roisman, the Executive Director of the Georgetown Law Institute for Technology Law and Policy. We're very, very excited this afternoon to be talking with two members of Congress who are joining us to talk about the very timely, very important issue of AI regulation. I'm going to take a step back, turn the mic over to Maddie Berga, who is one of our student interns at the Tech Institute this summer, to introduce our speakers today. Maddie.
Hello. Today we have here Congressman Ted Lieu. He represents California's 36th congressional district in the United States House of Representatives. Congressman Lieu is serving in his 5th term in Congress and currently serves on the House Judiciary, Foreign Affairs, and Science, Space, and Technology committees. He was elected by his colleagues to serve as vice chair of the Democratic Caucus, making him the highest ranking Asian American to have ever served in House leadership. As one of the few members of Congress with a computer science background, Congressman Lieu is sought out for his insight on tech policy matters. On Monday, he introduced the National AI Commission Act in the House, along with co-sponsors Representative Ken Buck and Representative Anna Eshoo. Congressman Lieu is also a graduate of Georgetown University Law Center, and we are thrilled to welcome him back to campus today. Congressman Ken Buck represents Colorado's 4th congressional district. He is also currently serving his 5th term in the United States House of Representatives. Congressman Buck serves on the House Judiciary Committee and the House Foreign Affairs Committee. He serves on the House Judiciary Subcommittee on Antitrust, Commercial, and Administrative Law, and he also serves on the Subcommittee on Immigration and Citizenship. Congressman Buck introduced the National AI Commission Act with Congressman Lieu. He also introduced a bipartisan bicameral block on the Nuclear Launch by Autonomous Artificial Intelligence Act with Congressman Lieu. And I will turn it now back to Natalie.
Thanks, Maddie. And thank you so much to both of you for being here today. Not to take anybody's punchline away, but I learned that the two of you are actually friends. And I don't want to feel like I'm interfering, it's just hanging out or anything. So if at any point you want me to just stop and you just want to carry the conversation on, that's great. We love that. As you can see from the turnout in the room today, there's a whole lot of excitement around the work that you're doing on AI regulation. So let's just jump right in. It's been just a little more than 48 hours since, along with Representative Eshoo and Senator Schatz, the two of you introduced the National AI Commission Act, which is bipartisan and bicameral legislation that's intended to create a national commission to focus on the question of regulating AI. One of your Senate colleagues, Senator Blumenthal, said recently, Congress failed to meet the moment on social media. Now we have the obligation to do it on AI before the threats and the risks become real. So why did the two of you decide to work together on this bill? And how is it different from other pending AI bills or proposals that are in the works? Congressman Buck?
Well, first, let me just say that I didn't know that Ted was a graduate of Georgetown Law School, and I feel like he has a home field advantage now. So,
yeah, that's why I let you bat first.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I hope I get the rebuttal close also for this. But I just want to say that I am honored to be here with Ted, and you should be honored to have him as a graduate of your law school, as well as here for this. Ted is one of those people who, when we were working on antitrust issues concerning companies that are headquartered in his home state of California, it took a lot of backbone to vote to send those bills to the floor. And we won some of those votes by 1 vote. And Ted was with us every single time on those votes. And it wasn't, I don't know how he would have voted on the floor, but he felt strongly enough that Congress should look at the issue, that he had the really intestinal fortitude, the backbone to say, we need to do this. And when you say that we got it wrong on the internet, and I'll talk a little bit about this with AI, the reason we got it wrong was we didn't follow up. We passed a law, and then it was just easier to let that law sit and not re-examine it from time to time and make sure that we had done the right thing. And as circumstances changed, and as some of the market participants gained more and more market share, we should have been looking at the law and changing the law and empowering some of the regulatory agencies. And I think that's what we ultimately need to do with AI, is not just pass some laws at the beginning and then turn our back on the situation. But the reason the commission is so important is that we look at where we are right now. It's really the genesis, the beginning of this huge step in mankind. This is a game changer. This is like the internet. And then what we do with the commission is we keep it in place so that we're continuing to examine in 3 years and 5 years what's going on.
So first of all, thank you all for being here, and I do appreciate the home court advantage. And I also want to say what a thrill it is for me to be here with Ken Buck. Before I talk about the commission, I do want to talk to you all about something that happened last night. Congressman Adam Schiff was censured by the House of Representatives. And essentially, all the Democrats opposed the censure, and all the Republicans supported it, except folks who are on the Ethics Committee. And I can guarantee you that the overwhelming majority of Ken Buck's constituents supported that censure. Ken Buck did not vote for it. And in my lifetime, I've seen very few acts of political courage. Last night was one of them. So I just want to put that on the record. And it's one of the reasons I love working with Ken Buck, because he's principled, he's consistent. We don't agree on everything, but I know if I make a good argument, he'll think about it. And sometimes he'll think I got it right, sometimes he'll think I got it wrong, but at least he gives everything a fair shake. And so it is really a pleasure to work with him. And one of the reasons we did this AI commission bill is we acknowledge that there's a lot we don't know. So we want to be humble. We know that there's so much innovation. It's happening so quickly that if we were to say right now, let's regulate AI, I'm not sure we could even define it. We wouldn't even know what we're regulating. So one of the reasons for the commission is we do want to have experts far smarter than us really delve into this, think about it every day, talk to other experts, and then it's fully transparent. We'll know who they talk to, their reasoning, how they arrive at the conclusions, and the recommendations they make and how we might want to regulate AI. It does no one any good for Ken Buck to meet with 12 AI experts and me to meet with 17 other ones. You don't know what they're telling us. And so I think this is a transparent way for the American public and members of Congress to sort of see the best ideas and have them vetted. And then Congress can look at those recommendations, we can adopt them, we can reject them, we can modify them. And I think in a field as complicated as AI, it would be a prudent approach.
Thank you. So to take a step back for a minute and just maybe do a little bit of table setting, let's talk generally about AI. And maybe for each of you, what are some areas where you see the possibility of some real benefits? And what are the areas where you see the greatest risks?
I'm sorry, could you?
Sure. In terms of AI, what are some of the areas where you see the greatest benefits, potential benefits, and where do you see the greatest risks?
Okay, so let me start with benefits. And actually, maybe let me just start with how I, as a legislator, think about AI. And to me, the best analogy I have is there are two bodies of water. There's a huge, large ocean of AI, and then there's a small lake. And in this large ocean is all the AI we don't care about. So if you're a smart toaster, has a preference for wheat toast over rye toast, we don't care about. So in this small lake, you might wonder, well, why would we care about the data? And I think there's, to me, three buckets. I'll start with the most extreme example. It could destroy the world. So it turns out that the Department of Defense has automated weapons that launch autonomously. And the view of Ken Buck and I and others is that we don't care how amazing AI gets. We will never, ever let it launch a nuclear weapon. There must be meaningful human control. Human being has to do it. So we introduced bipartisan legislation to put that into law. The second bucket would be, okay, AI that can't destroy the world, but could kill you individually. So when your cell phone malfunctions, it is not going 50 miles per hour. But when a vehicle and automated driving mode malfunctions, like a bunch of Teslas, and these various articles have shown, that ends up harming people, killing people, injuring people. And there's a lot of AI in lots of moving things, planes, trains, automobiles. So my sense is we probably need more federal regulators who are more attuned to the unique aspects of AI. And then the final bucket would be sort of I think the most difficult one, which is AI that can cause harms to society through discrimination or biases and so on. So for example, with facial recognition technology, it is amazing, but less accurate for people with darker skin. In my view, as we deploy it nationwide, at law enforcement agencies, it's a big, massive equal protection violation. Minorities should be misidentified at higher rates. So those are sort of reasons or things I think of as legislators in terms of sort of benefits.
I think the benefits are going to be unreal, and it's the shiny object, and we'll all get focused on the benefits and we'll forget about the potential harms. But you think about medicine and the whole healthcare area and the ability to create new medicines or healthcare procedures. We now have robots performing microsurgeries. Now we'll have AI and robots performing microsurgeries. We'll have just so many innovations in areas that are going to help human beings that we have to be so careful. One of the things that Ted and I feel strongly about and have talked a lot about, and that's civil liberties and how we protect citizens from our government. And it's not that government is inherently evil. Government's trying to promote security. They want to make sure that we're safe. Well, we want to make sure we're safe too, but we don't want to give up our liberty in the process of making sure that we're safe. And so how do we check government's use of AI? We had a witness yesterday in Judiciary Committee. Ted and I started talking about FISA reform, the Foreign Intelligence Security Act reform, after that witness, because it prompted us to think through certain things. But how do we protect citizens at the same time promoting security with AI? Very complicated, because we don't know what AI can do right now. We have to understand AI better to know this is where government is going to take us. And I'll give you one quick example. The government now, so how many people here use TikTok? All right. How many people here use social media generally, games and other things? People with my hair color don't necessarily raise their hands at the same rate as the folks in this room, but all that information that you're giving to this machine is being used in a way you're voluntarily giving up your privacy. Before you use something, you sign a user agreement, you give up your privacy. Well, the FBI can't knock on your door, open your door, go in and search your house, but they can buy from a company all that information that you voluntarily gave up. So is that something that we want to protect American citizens? They're not doing it illegally. China can buy it, and Microsoft can buy it. All these companies can buy it, but should the government be able to buy it? It's a complex question. Now you take AI and you put it on top of what we're doing now, it becomes a very complex question. And so that's what people who care about civil liberties more than just security, like Ted and I, are really focused on and grappling with is how to see the dangers of AI 10 years from now in how it's going to be, how it grows and matures, and make sure that we're protecting Americans in that process.
I just want to add one real quick thing on benefits, because when Ken talked about the medical field, reminded me that we were both at a presentation by Microsoft a few weeks ago by Brad Smith, and he talked about this technology regarding your eyes. So it turns out that there are hundreds of millions of people worldwide who have a certain kind of diabetes that can lead to blindness. Most folks don't have very good access to ophthalmologists. If you just have a phone now, you can take a picture of your eyes. This AI algorithm with 97% accuracy will let you know, are you likely to go blind, have this certain kind of disease, and then they can at least try to seek treatment. So it's going to basically deliver this healthcare to people who never would get any other kind of eye healthcare. And so it is pretty amazing, I think, in terms of medical field, all the advancements.
But if they sell that information to an insurance company and you have to pay a
True.
higher rate
There you
because
go.
they've
That's a
got
good
something
point.
in your eye that shows you're going to
Yeah.
have diabetes in 5 years, we got a problem.
I'm gluten-free, so I'm still back on the smart toaster.
Ah.
But I appreciate the other benefits. I wanted to talk a little bit about the type and scope of commission, or sorry, of federal agency that you think that a commission might recommend. And I understand that the bill is intended to create the commission that makes a recommendation, and so it's a little bit down the road. But as you think about what you might like to see a new agency or department look like, are you envisioning something that is focused exclusively on AI? Do you see benefits to that as opposed to something that more broadly is addressing internet issues or digital platform type issues? What makes you think that an AI agency is the right answer here?
So I've thought about this issue quite a bit, and my studied answer is I don't know, which is why we're creating this commission to really make recommendations, because there are a variety of different ways that this could happen. It could be that we empower existing agencies with more authority and more folks to look at specific AI within the jurisdiction. Maybe it is a separate agency. Maybe it's using other kinds of laws. And so one of the things commission does is it actually is tasked with looking at what we have there already, right? So NIST has a pretty good AI risk framework. And if experts and folks think that's a pretty good framework, we don't really have to recreate the wheel. And maybe we try to make parts of that more mandatory, except instead of voluntary. So we do leave it up to commission to sort of decide what might be the best structure. And the other advantage of this commission is there's some time that's going to pass. And it is possible all 37 harms that are predicted from this new AI happen. Maybe 3 of them happen. Maybe a whole new harm we don't know about happens. So I think it's sort of early to basically put into law some sort of regulatory approach, because I don't even know if we explain right now what we're regulating.
Yeah, I think the commission acts in sort of an umbrella fashion. You named the area of our economy, and AI is going to impact. And so education, for example, something that's probably of interest to a lot of the folks in this room, is going to be impacted by AI. And it's going to give kids that don't have the opportunity to have a tutor, or the opportunity to go to a prep school, or the opportunity to get an education in some exclusive areas, going to give those kids an advantage from where they are right now. It's going to give a kid who's gifted and talented the advantage or the opportunity to accelerate at his or her own pace. So it's really huge, but we have an education department, and we don't need to form an AI education department. So I can see where the commission is going to set some general rules, and these agencies that we have in place are going to take the lead in specific areas. One of the areas that Ted and I care a lot about is competition, and making sure that Microsoft or any other company doesn't control AI, whether it's because of bias or whether it's because of innovation. We don't out innovate our adversaries in China, in Russia, in Iran, in you name the country that countries that don't share our values, we lose. We've got to stay ahead of those countries. So we can't stifle innovation, but at the same time, we need to protect the public.
So following up on that, one question that you've just touched on is what type of entity, right? And what the scope might be. A secondary but equally important question is what type of regulation? So have you thought about different possible models of regulation? Some folks have floated the idea of some kind of licensing. There's kind of a baseline, maybe smart toaster AI. You don't need a license to make smart toasters, but maybe as the risks increase, as the sensitivity of the information involved increases, those applications might need to be licensed. Do you like that model? Do you have other models in mind?
Well, I'm a free market guy. So I believe the marketplace regulates as much as possible. There are some harms. I don't think the marketplace regulates nuclear energy. I don't think there are some things that are so dangerous in and of themselves that they need to be regulated. But if you're talking about the AI production for healthcare, I think that healthcare companies understand the risks and need to understand the risks, and they are best situated to determine what type of AI and who produces it for them. Now, when we get into nuclear weapons, when we get into some other areas, certainly the government is going to have more of a say in those areas. But I think for the most part, the less we regulate AI. Now you got to understand the group that wants to regulate AI the most are the folks that have it. If you can't go into your garage and create AI because the government doesn't give you a license, that's the best of all worlds for those mega companies. So I want the Amazons of the world and the Microsofts of the world started in the garage. I want more garages in this country and less regulation from the top down that stifles the kind of innovation that has made us really the leading innovator in the history of the world.
So I can tell you a model that won't work. So I introduced a bill on facial recognition technology. It took me over 2 years working with stakeholders, law enforcement agencies, civil rights groups to introduce a bill that made any sort of sense. So I do not believe Congress has the bandwidth or the capacity to try to regulate AI through laws on every potentially harmful application. A better model would be, regulators, because if they make a mistake, they can reverse it without another act of Congress. And this is something they do, that's their job. They do it all the time, right? Members of Congress are thinking about 27 different things on any given day. And so I don't think it's possible for us to pass individual laws in the same way that we don't pass specific laws approving or disapproving individual drugs. We just don't have the capacity to do that. We have an agency to do that. I do agree with Ken on, it is true that startups are not asking to be licensed, right? And a couple of weeks ago, I was reading that in the prior week, 50 new AI applications came online. If they all had to be licensed, that just would not have happened, right? Because it takes time if you put in that kind of structure. I'm not opposed to it necessarily. I just don't think we have enough information to even know what it is we want to license and why. And I think we just need to see a little more of this development happen, see if these harms actually occur, and then sort of think about how we might want to prevent them.
So there is some sentiment, maybe within DC, but I think especially outside DC, in some quarters at least, where there is skepticism, can I say, of the administrative state. There may be some folks who don't think that more government or another agency or a new department is the right answer for anything. What do you think needs to happen to convince people, both your colleagues, and their constituents, that something like a new agency is the right answer for AI?
Well, so I think people's views on that would depend on what they think of a particular subject. So I think folks would probably say we probably would like an agency to regulate the safety of airplanes, because we don't know a lot about that as an individual American, and we want to be safe when we're flying. I think many people might say, we really don't like that social media looks largely unregulated. We're not probably happy with that sort of system. So with AI, I think it's still evolving so quickly. I think it's just hard to sort of put our minds around it. It's almost like saying, hey, how do you regulate software? I don't know. It's just a really large thing to try to do, right? And so AI is going to be in so many different places. Perhaps it is important to have an agency that is designed to think about that and regulate AI, but it just to be so not well defined at this exact point that it's just a hard question to answer.
Yeah, I think it's a hard question to answer. Also, I'm one of those folks that lives outside the Beltway that thinks that the administrative state is dangerous because of how it interferes with civil liberties. And so I would be very careful before I created a new agency. But I think there's a difference between regulate and promote. I'm all in favor of the federal government, state governments, local governments promoting AI. I think it can be used in so many ways that we should be investing and partnering with the private sector to find ways that AI is useful. What I'm concerned about is putting the brakes on AI because it could be abused if it was used this way. We have a constitution, and I attended at least 3 out of my constitutional law classes, so I'm really up to speed on it. And it is the framework that we have for every innovation in this country, and we should make sure that people have access to the courts. If AI is being used in a way that discriminates against a minority, against a gender, against anybody, then let's make sure we have access to the courts and challenge that. But let's not have a regulatory body that says, well, there's a potential harm there, so we're going to slow innovation until we figure this out. That's where I think the danger of the administrative state is.
I want to follow up on that by talking about an area, Congressman Buck, where you have identified a particular interest, and I know you have it as well, Congressman Lieu, which is nuclear weapons, right? And to have you talk a little bit more in detail about what the concerns are there for AI and why they are so different in the nuclear context versus conventional weapons.
Yeah, this is Ted's baby, and I should defer to Ted on this. Ted is a honcho in the Air Force Reserve, and I don't know if you're still in the Air Force Reserve.
I retired after 21 years.
Okay, so he is a patriot in many ways and a hero of mine. I actually attended his ceremony. Was it Lieutenant Colonel?
It was to Lieutenant Colonel at the time.
Yeah, really cool ceremony that was held on Capitol Hill. But Ted came to me and said, you're not going to believe this, but it's possible that a nuclear weapon could be launched without a human in the chain of command. And it's a scary thought. Now, we have an executive order that protects against that, but it's much better to have a law because the military, if the executive order was rescinded, the military has to follow the orders of the commander in chief. If there is a law in place, the military cannot act contrary to law. So even if they had an order, they would have to be a legal order in order for them to be able to follow it. So it's important that we have a law that does that. But I will let, if you don't mind, Ted go into more of the details of that.
So let me take a step back and just explain, as a recovering computer science major, right? To me, a fundamental unfixable problem with AI. So I had lunch with a facial recognition professor a few years ago, and he was explaining, how amazing this technology is. You feed it, 10 million pictures of cats, and it figures out what's a cat and what's not a cat. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like, how does it work? And he says, at a very basic level, we don't know. So they know that it gets to the right conclusion, but they can't trace it. They can't explain how it gets there. And there was this very famous example of these AI researchers who were looking at developing an algorithm to see if they can detect tuberculosis from X-ray scans. And in development, it worked really well. Then they deployed it and totally failed. And they realized after they did auditing and testing that what the AI was doing is it was figuring out, did it get a X-ray from a new machine or an older machine? Because it turned out that folks who got tuberculosis were not primarily from Western countries with newer machines. They were from poor countries with older machines. So that was a pattern the AI was detecting, and the researchers didn't know because they can't trace it. They really don't really know what the AI is doing. So it could be that this AI is correct 99.99% of the time. And there's this weird scenario where it goes berserk. So that just can't happen, right? If it has controlled nuclear weapons. We just can't have that possibility. So that is sort of another reason for why I'm very passionate about that particular thing.
99.99% doesn't work with the blowing up the earth.
There we go.
Yeah.
So, but what about conventional weapons? I mean, I understand obviously the scale and scope of nuclear weapons is much more significant, but might it be okay to have a 99.9% correct rate when it comes to AI and conventional warfare, or is that not okay either?
So nuclear weapons are on a wholly different scale, right? That is an open question. I have to think about that.
I'll take the risk. Yes, it's okay. Because what we're doing in conventional warfare is we are setting the parameters of the battlefield, and we are empowering our military to attack this area of the battlefield. And if we launch a nuclear weapon, it doesn't stop. It starts a reciprocal launch. And so the world ends at that point. If we hit what we think is a tank and it's a civilian car, we kill 4 people. And so, yes, it's horrible that we killed 4 people, and it's a terrible part of the reality of war, but it's not the end of the earth. So I think the reality is that we are going to empower AI to kill everything that's in this square mile. But we're not going to empower AI to start what would end up being a reciprocal nuclear war.
So by the way, it's already happening, just so you know. I was at this interesting discussion with Senator Rounds, and he was just describing the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And one of the countries had developed these basically loitering drones that would hover over the battle space. And then they would talk to each other and figure out what the targets were, what was the most efficient way to destroy those targets and how to do it. It was just all automated, and then they would attack. And you normally wouldn't think of those 2 countries as being particularly advanced in AI, but they're already doing this. So it's already sort of happening. And I'm not sure we could stop that. I'm not sure if we unilaterally said we don't do that, that our enemies would actually not do that. So I tend to agree with Ken.
So I want to go back to something that you said before about the not knowing how AI works. Why does AI come to the conclusions that it comes to? What could we be doing, if you think it's a good idea, to increase the transparency, to make AI models more accessible to scholars in academia, civil society groups, to a new government agency if there were one? Is that something that people should have more access to in order to try to unpack it?
I don't think you'll ever get more transparency over what it's doing, because it's just the nature of the way these algorithms are designed. So just very briefly, what happens is you basically set up at the very beginning sort of these, so let's say something. When you look at a picture, right, it's a picture, but when a computer looks at it, it's a bunch of tiny little pixels. So let's say you have this grid of tiny little pixels, and each of them are on and off. What neural networks do is they set up sort of layers of these pixels. And at the beginning, they're just assigned random weights. Some pixels are on, some are off. And then they feed it a picture of a cat. And the algorithm says, that's not a cat. And you're like, no, you're wrong, it's a cat. And then it changes some of these numbers. And then you feed another picture of a cat, and it says, that's not a cat. And you go, oh, you're wrong, it's a cat. And then it changes some more numbers. And then you feed it a cat, and it says, that's a cat. And you go, yes, that's a cat. And then it changes some more weights. And then at the end of the day, you feed it a cat and it knows exactly what a cat is. But again, there's just no way to look at that with any sort of transparency and understand, well, why those particular weights, what is the computer actually doing? The way you can get transparency is you just have to audit it and keep sending it pictures and seeing if it does something wacky, in iteration number 3,459. I'm not sure there's really any other way to do it, which is why you may have seen this story last month about this lawyer that got in trouble. He submitted a legal brief using, I think it was ChatGPT, and basically there are all these fake case studies. Because what these large language models do is they're not trained for telling the truth. They're trained to write pleasing sentences and pleasing paragraphs that seem to respond to your question. And when they scour the entire internet, the AI algorithm figured out that, oh, we notice in legal briefs, there's this weird thing that people stick in that's italicized and has sort of these numbers. So I'm just going to make that up because I notice that that's their pattern of other legal briefs. And these are just totally made up cases. And so you wouldn't know that because you don't know what the AI is doing unless you sort of audited it and then figured out, oh, it's doing this bad thing.
Do you have a rule in your offices about whether your staff or interns can use ChatGPT?
You have a ChatGPT.
I am agnostic as to what my staff do.
Oh, okay. I haven't gotten it yet. I'm dying to get it just so we can learn. But I have a different story. If I can tell the story,
Please.
It sort of answers your question. I came home one day. My son was 10. My daughter was 7, and the babysitter was crying. And I said, "Why are you crying?" And she said, "Cody hit Caitlin." And I said, "Cody, don't hit Caitlin anymore." She says, "Okay." I come home the next day. The babysitter's crying. I said, "What's wrong now?" She said, "Cody punched a hole in the wall." So I went over, he played football at West Point. He's a big kid. It was a big hole. I went over and I said, "Why'd you punch a hole in the wall?" And he said, "Because you told me I couldn't hit Caitlin." So I don't understand how boys think. I'm never going to understand how AI thinks. And you know what? I don't really care how boys think. I just don't want them to punch a hole in the wall. And as long as the AI identifies a cat as a cat, I'm happy. I don't need to know the algorithm. I just need to know that it's going to act the right way. And we need to make sure that we are testing and developing the program enough so we get the end result. There's going to be maybe a few people on Earth that are going to understand the algorithm and the process. But when I understand 10-year-old boys, I'll then worry about AI.
I don't know if any of us will ever understand 10-year-old boys, so that is very far in the future, if at all. I just want to ask a couple more questions, and then we're going to open up to the audience to see what questions people might have. So one question is about kind of the US landscape. You mentioned NIST before. The White House did a blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights. NTIA has a proceeding that is open on AI accountability. As you look around and you see what the branches outside of yours are doing with respect to AI, do you think it's enough? Would you like to see more?
I think it's great that everyone's doing a lot. And I have talked to some of the folks who were on the panel that created the Bill of Rights and other AI criteria. And I think it's great. The more ideas, the better. I guess the concern is that we keep moving forward. We are ahead of the rest of the world right now, and we've got to stay ahead of the rest of the world. And so insofar as we are promoting AI with these panels and making sure that resources are available, and look, the private sector is going to make a bunch of money off of this. So there's incentive for them to invest, and there's capital right now to invest. And so this is going to be where a lot of the investment goes. I think all that's great. What we should be doing is identifying the harm. They'll figure out how to make money. They'll figure out how to innovate. We just need to make sure what they innovate doesn't hurt and doesn't infringe on our rights.
And so the commission bill actually does have that in the bill. It says basically, look at preventing risk, but allow innovation to proceed. And by the way, there's precedent for this commission. So there was a AI commission set up in the military DoD space, chaired by Eric Schmidt, that made recommendations, and then a number of them were adopted. So there is precedence for this. We're sort of doing this in the non-classified space. But one of the reasons they did that is they realized how complicated sort of this whole field was.
Well, I'm glad, Congressman Buck, that you mentioned US leadership here, because I did want to ask a question about the rest of the world, countries, regions like the EU that are themselves tackling AI. What impact, if any, do you think that actions outside the US will have in terms of our speed and our approach to regulating AI?
Well, I think that one of the things we're going to see is hacking at a whole new level. And so our AI has to have cybersecurity at a whole new level. A lot of what we're going to use our AI to do is to counter the evil that will come from other places. And frankly, from within our country also. There's plenty of hackers within our country, but the computing capability to produce things with AI can only be done by a few mega corporations and a few governments. You're not going to see, the guy who dumpster dives and finds your old check and tries to rip you off in your bank is different than the AI hacker that can do harm on a mega level. So I think that a lot of what we will do with AI, and again, the private sector will be invested in this and will innovate with this, but a lot of our AI will prevent harms from other countries that are intending to cripple our financial system or other systems that we have. On the military side, most of that is classified, and I can just say to you that we're doing well. We are in a position that we can defend our country from our adversaries if they decided to engage in that kind of activity.
So I agree with Ken that very few countries or companies can do these large language models. There was an interesting article in the Washington Post earlier this month that basically was titled, "Every time you use an AI chatbot, it loses money." So it's estimated that OpenAI loses $700,000 a day just to run ChatGPT. They lost $540 million last year. Now, part of it is their mission is quite different, which is to be everything for everyone in the entire world. That is different than if, let's say, you had a model that says, we're just going to, figure out, can we detect tumors and radiological scans, where you don't have to train it on knowing about Shakespeare, right? So I think it depends on what you're talking about in terms of the US leading. So I think the US is leading in pretty much all of that. Other countries like China are ahead in certain discrete areas, like facial recognition technology. China is just better at that and more ahead. And part of it is their use and their view of AI is different than the US. We had a witness today in science-based technology who had studied this, and he said they're actually really not interested in these large language models because they don't know how they can control that. And they want stability, right? They want to control their population. So they don't want to launch this stuff for their citizens and have them just type stuff in and be told all sorts of stuff that the CCP might not agree with. What they do want is use it for facial recognition, likely for hacking, for military uses. So I'm not super worried that economically China is going to come up with any huge new AI advancements on the commercial side that the US hasn't already done.
Thanks. We're going to take some audience questions. We are live streaming and we are recording, so we're going to ask that you use the mic to ask your question just so that we can have that fully captured. Questions? Let's start over here.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Sana. I'm senior manager in Ukrainian government and I'm fellow here at Georgetown. So it's just like describe my questions, why it's come. So the first one is in Europe we have GDPR and there's many great sides of it, but one of the bad side of GDPR is it's constrained government from building very efficient and automated services for people, public services. Just example, when one agency can take data from another agency and in this way to be more convenient, user-friendly, and so on. So it's a really sometimes a barrier. And what do you think, giving this back, the perspective from the AI, should be there different regulation for the public sector, for the government, and for the private sector? And if you think so, in which way?
So as law students, right, you should never plagiarize. But we as legislators do that all the time, because what we do is we see what other jurisdictions do. And if it turns out well, we copy it. But if it doesn't, we don't copy it. And so that's another sort of reason we have this commission, is it can actually look at what other places have done. And if they do something well, we will copy that. So Europe is going ahead with AI regulation, and people have said that they're more advanced than the US on AI regulation. So it's clear they're more advanced in terms of timeline. It's not clear that the regulation itself is advanced. Like, we don't know. It could be really great, it could be a total disaster. So we'll have some time to assess that. And if it's really great, then we might try to copy it. But if it causes barriers like the existing law you're talking about, we're obviously not going to copy it.
Hi there, my name is Samantha Hubner, and I'm an affiliate researcher at the Center for Security and Emerging Technologies Cyber AI Project. Earlier this morning, 4 witnesses gave expert testimony to some of your colleagues on advancing AI, and ranking member Zoe Lofgren asked specifically about the advantages between licensing versus registration, which you guys talked a little bit about earlier. I'm curious to know if you guys have any considerations now, any precedents that you might draw from as you weigh the pros and cons of licensing versus registration, particularly in light of competition.
Yeah, I think that one of the reasons we're so interested in this commission is to hear that kind of expert testimony and to be able to make an intelligent decision, again, on how do we make sure that we innovate at the same time protect from harms. And so there may be a breakdown where some areas of the economy we're more interested in regulating licensing, and some areas of the economy we're more interested in promoting and seeing where it heads. But it'd be very difficult right now to tell you exactly where that breakdown would occur.
Just real quick. So, well, clearly registration will be faster, right? But again, I'm not even sure we would know what we're registering or licensing or why, right? So, for example, the earlier example we used about an AI app that can tell if you're likely going to go blind with this diabetes, it is not fully accurate, right? It is going to be wrong 3 to 4% of the time. So do you make them go through licensing so that they can then be forced to, let's say, disclose we're not accurate 3 to 4% of the time? Or do you just let them innovate? Because it is pretty darn good, right, for a lot of people. And so I don't know, I think I need to be told for a rationale for why we're licensing. So what is the reason?
So I think we're going to give you some law school flashbacks. I see Professor Paul Ohm has his hand up back here. So now you're really on the hot seat.
You're going to hold it? Okay. So yeah, I'm Paul Ohm. I'm on the faculty. I also had the privilege of serving on a government commission. I was on the Commission on Evidence-Based Policymaking. And one thing I've learned when I see bills for commissions is you look at the definition of who has to be on the commission. And in your bill, which I applaud you for advancing, it says scientists, civil society members, people from industry, and people with government experience. And I want to hear more about where those categories came from. I'm a little surprised that there are no minimums placed on any of them. So you could literally have 0 people from civil society. There is a provision that says no one of these categories can form the majority. The commission I was on was much more prescriptive. 1 privacy person for each data person. So that's question 1. And question 2 is civil society is such a big category. I would have preferred privacy broken out, civil liberties broken out, discrimination broken out. And yet your list is civil society as one line and even includes the creative communities, which I understand why they're part of this bill. But I wonder if we'd get more purchase if you had 5 different types of people focused on civil rights, civil liberties as separate categories, and then a little more prescription about how many of each we'd like to see on the commission.
I do want to say that unlike in law school, you can pass.
So that's a great question. So we would have done it that way if we had a 90-member commission, right? But because that would not be that functional and it had to be size limited, 20 is already pretty big, that we felt like we couldn't get very prescriptive. Because then you will end up sort of in law automatically excluding some folks. So we just give wide discretion to the president and our legislative leaders to come up with the right balance. And so there's a level of trust there. We hope that they would do that. But it's mostly driven by we couldn't figure out a way to be that prescriptive without ending up just naturally excluding a whole bunch of folks right off the start.
So I'm a Republican, I'm from uncivil society. And I think it's really important that we make sure that we are inclusive. But the real issue whenever you try to pass a bill is the politics. When we restrict the speaker and we restrict the minority leader and we restrict the majority leader in the Senate and the president to finding particular categories and filling only those categories and don't make it broad enough, we don't get a bill passed. So we are behind right now. You know, the AI isn't slowing up and saying, hey, government, come regulate us, come license us, let us know how it's going, and then we'll proceed. You know, maybe in 3 or 4 years when you're done, we'll keep going. It's moving right now. And the idea for this commission is, I hope by the end of the year, it's on the president's desk. If it's not, if it doesn't happen this Congress, it's a shame, because we can't let what happened to the internet happen to AI. We have got to get ahead of it. And it may be that the conclusion is don't do anything, but it's a studied, thoughtful conclusion as opposed to it's just not politically expedient. So we're going to pass. I don't want to make a pun, but pass the buck.
Can you talk a little bit more about what you think is the path to getting this bill passed? What needs to happen?
Well, the first thing is bipartisan. And the second thing is that it's bicameral. And really, I don't know how many of you have worked with the Senate or observed the Senate, but they take a lot of naps. So if you come over to the House side, there's a lot of energy, a lot of things get done. On the Senate side, not so much. So what happens is the Senate puts things in what they call omni bills. They just throw everything into a big bill. Somebody gets something out of every one of those bills, and hopefully you get enough people to vote for them. On the House side, we argue about what time the vote should be and how many people should be through the door at what time. And we're arguing about everything in the House, but the Senate doesn't. So we've got to figure out how to get it through. And then the reality also is Republicans are in charge in the House, Democrats are in charge in the Senate. You got to get those two sides to get together at a leadership level, not just at a worker bee level. And the White House is going to want to have input on that. So there is a complicated process that will evolve. The first step is getting the bill in and starting the conversation. But hopefully, like I said, by the end of this year, certainly by the end of next year, we're in the process of at least studying what has been going on for a number of years now.
So Ken Buck is in the majority party in the House. I'm counting completely on Ken to get it through.
It's my fault if it doesn't pass.
No pressure, no pressure. Any more audience questions? One? No?
Hi, Avery Blank. I just completed my LLM in technical and policy. I clerk in the Senate focusing on artificial intelligence. So my question is to follow up on what you just talked about. You just introduced your bill this week. Leader Schumer just introduced his safe innovation framework yesterday. What is your hope, or what do you think at least both of the chambers can agree upon? You know, the main issues, you know, at this point, generally, or hopefully, by the end of this year, where do you think are the main points of agreement and perhaps even some points of contention if you're willing to share that?
So I'm just going to read you one of the quotes from Leader Schumer when he introduced his framework, which I think it's great that he's very active in this field. He didn't actually introduce any legislation, right? He sort of introduced a framework for what legislation probably should follow. And this is one of his quotes, which is, "We need the best of the best sitting at the table, the top AI developers, top executives, scientists, advocates, community leaders, workers, national security experts, all together in one room doing years of work in a matter of months." That sounds like a commission to me. That's just my view.
And I agree. I think what's ultimately going to happen is that you'll probably see 7 or 8 bills and people getting together and taking the best ideas from those bills, putting them together and trying to pass something at the dead of night when no one's looking. As you know, from having worked in the no more law professors with hard questions?
Question. Oh, back row over here.
Hi, my name is Cameron Lynn. I go to Howard University School of Law. And one of the big things I've noticed about AI very recently that's very present right now is how it's being used to affect art, different creation of art pieces, music, and different things. So what type of work is being done to advance those issues and talk about those problems in the House Commission?
So the commission would also look at that area. So Ken and I are on the Judiciary Committee, and we've had these interesting hearings the IP subcommittee has. And so just to let you all know what's happening, large language models like ChatGPT, they scour the entire internet. It turns out that there's a bunch of copyrighted works on the internet. They don't pay for that. So there's one question: should they pay for that? Or is that fair use? I don't know. Then let's say you use ChatGPT, or let's say you design your own algorithm, let's say based on music. And what it'll do is it will pop out lyrics that are similar to Taylor Swift lyrics. Do you have to pay for that? I don't know. And then let's say you go, okay, I'm then going to match this up to existing AI algorithms that if you feed it half an hour's worth of audio, it will mimic that voice. And then you have a voice that sounds like Taylor Swift using lyrics that are like Taylor Swift lyrics that y'all got from the internet. And then you put this song out, do you pay for that? When I say pay, do you pay Taylor Swift for any of that? I don't know. But there are cases running through the court system right now that will look and try to answer some of those questions. I think it's really soon to tell. I'm happy to take input and recommendations as to how we might want to think about this. I just honestly really don't know the answer to that.
I would point out sort of a similar situation with local news. People get their news, they go on Google, they get a news story, the newspaper doesn't get compensated for it. Local news has decreased around 60%. In other words, 60% of local news outlets are out of business or have been gobbled up in a way that you use Associated Press, but you don't see it. If we're not careful, that's what's going to happen in music and art in other areas. And it worries, I think, both of us. It certainly worries me that what we celebrate in this country is creativity and expression and the sort of freedom to challenge the norms through art and music. And if those people who make a living doing that, and a lot of times it's not Taylor Swift living, it's wait tables and make a living doing that, then we lose something that I think is the essence of this country. And so we can't allow AI to do the kind of things that Ted was talking about. The courts are Article 3. The reason Congress is Article 1 is because we're supposed to be doing that. And oftentimes we say, we'll let the courts figure out this antitrust issue. What is consumer welfare? How does it work? I think we've got to give the courts some really clear direction on, or a company in the marketplace will figure out how to make money and really harm what I think is part of the essence of America.
So I'm going to take it back and finish up with a couple of questions here. And the first one is this. When we have legal practitioners who come to campus, we never want to miss an opportunity to ask some career-oriented questions, because we do have law students and other students and people who are new to the profession who are interested in hearing about your thoughts. So the question is this, and we will not just ask you, even though you are the one who is a Hoya, but you also went to law school, so this will be helpful for the crowd. What was your favorite class? What was the most important lesson you learned? And what words of advice would you share with today's law students? You do have to go first.
I have to go first?
Yeah. So
Oh,
here
I'm
we are,
happy to
yeah.
go first. So I actually went to the University of Wyoming, and then I taught law school in the LLM program and in the law school program. I don't think they call it undergraduate law school, but the law school program. I was a prosecutor, and I was teaching criminal procedure in both areas. And I can tell you that my favorite class in law school was constitutional law. And I say that because I became the ranking Republican on the antitrust subcommittee, and I wish I had gone to that class more. So my advice to you would be to listen to everything that's being taught. You don't realize what an absolute gem it is to go to a great law school with great minds. And when you're 10 years down the road, you don't have a clue what you're going to be doing, because someone's going to walk up to you and say, this is our client, or this is our need right now, and you're going to be doing it. And you're going to say, I remember that guy with gray hair. He was kind of a redneck, but he said I should have listened in this class. And that's what you should be doing, because law school really teaches you how to think and how to write and how to compose your thoughts in a succinct way that is persuasive. And if you can broaden that in as many areas as possible, I think you'll have a huge advantage.
I had two favorite classes. One was also con law. I was taught by Professor David Cole. I just had lunch with him actually a few weeks ago. He is on leave from Georgetown University Law Center. He's now the ACLU legal director, but he'll be coming back to Georgetown. Another was basically on nuclear treaties and arms control treaties. And one of the cool things about Georgetown is because you have so many professors here and so many classes, you can take some really sort of interesting classes that at that time I thought would have no relevance whatsoever in my life. I just thought it'd be sort of interesting, but now it actually sort of is relevant. And so you actually never know what your future might be. And then my advice I give to anyone with that question is that as far as I can tell, you only live once. And so whatever your dream is, whether it is to be a lawyer or a ballet dancer, it's probably too late for you to do that, but that's what you want to do. Or a doctor or a clarinet player, you should pursue that, because I know of no other lifetime which you can pursue your dream. That's my advice.
A number of your colleagues in the House are not lawyers. How do you view the fact that you have law degrees and are experienced in the legal field? How does that affect your ability to get your job done?
They're both looking at me. So I think that the beauty of having 435 people in one room is everybody has a different background. So Ted and I are both lawyers. I put people in prison for a long, long time for a living. Ted not only worked in the military, but did other kinds of law. So we have a similar educational background, but we have much different life experiences. We have folks who have risen to the level of general We have Navy SEALs, we have farmers, we have business people, we have so many people, and yet we also represent areas of the country that are so different. You can be from the left coast, no offense, or you can be from the middle of the country, and the news that you receive, the information you receive, the feedback that you get, completely different. And I think the beauty of the house is to work together with someone that doesn't have a similar background educationally, professionally, by area of the country. That's really what makes, I think, this country great is we get 435. And that's one of the worst things that happened during COVID was we didn't necessarily all get together and have a chance to interact. And now we do. And so I think that diversity on every level in the House is really great.
So I think, so I agree with everything Ken said. And what we learn to do is we learn to trust other people who have expertise in other areas, right? Because as members of Congress, every legislative cycle of 2 years, we vote over 1,000 times. And it's on hundreds of different issues. And I remember, actually, I was my freshman year. By the way, Ken and I came together in the same class year. He happened to be president Republican freshman class. I was president Democratic freshman class. And for both of us, it was just a whole brand new experience. I remember getting a call from my staff. It was on a Wednesday late afternoon. We're gonna have votes Thursday morning. And they said, what do you think about lifting the trade embargo on Cuban military officers? So I thought about that for about 3 seconds. And I said, I have no idea. I've never thought about that issue. I don't understand the equities of that issue. So you do rely a lot on staff to then write you a briefing on it. But you also rely on lots of other people because, for example, I know very little about agriculture. The agriculture in my district basically consists of gardens on top of hotels. And we're going to vote on a farm bill. So I'm going to rely on people on the agriculture committee. And if it passes out of that committee, for example, on a bipartisan basis, I'm much more likely to support it because I'm going to trust that experts on that committee look at this and made some sensible decisions. I'll have specific discrete issues I'm interested in, just as an aside, by the way. A whole bunch of young people, young students are lactose intolerant. And we pretty much serve milk every day during school days for these folks. And they're making kids sick or they're just not drinking it. It's just really dumb. We should at least provide other options. And you can have lactate and so on. But anyways, separate from that, most of the agriculture bill or farm bill, I'm not going to have a huge amount of expertise on. So I'm just going to rely on people that have that kind of expertise and then hope that, that they got it right.
Last question, because you've been so generous with your time and your insights. A lot of things take a lot of time here in Washington, as we've talked about. And sometimes that's good, right? Because the process itself can yield something that is better than how it starts out. But I imagine that sometimes you must both feel like you just wish something would happen right away, something that really needs to be addressed. So my question is that you have a magic wand, you get to choose one thing only, and it's done. It's taken care of. You either have a piece of legislation or you have a commission or whatever it is that you want. Congressman Buck, what would you do with your magic wand?
I get on the hot seat first. Well, I came here because I am so concerned about spending and our national debt. That is, even though I was a prosecutor and I had, background in some other areas, the spending issue to me is the issue that everybody here that doesn't have hair my color should really be concerned about because we are going off a cliff. It is an existential issue to this country's security and to our way of life. And so I would say that we need a balanced budget amendment in this country to force Congress to do what states do, what families do, what counties do. It doesn't mean we don't look at revenue. As a Republican, we may have to raise taxes. We may have to look at Social Security and Medicare and the entitlements, but we have to get under control. We have $32 trillion of debt. We're going to $36 trillion of debt by the end of next year. And the trajectory goes in a really bad direction very soon. So a balanced budget amendment, from my perspective, is the most important thing that I would wave my wand and do.
Thank you. And now with the Hoya home field advantage,
Yeah.
you get to go last,
Sure.
Congressman Lieu.
I would eliminate the filibuster. I think it's undemocratic.
Thank you both so much for joining us here today. We deeply appreciate the time that you've spent. Thanks to your staffs for helping to make it possible. We really appreciate them as well. I'm so glad to have you both at Georgetown. Please join me in thanking our speakers. I think we're good.
Thanks.
Hi,
Oh, that's-
good to see you.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, great.